right here. Unless you want to do this. And I'm very sorry, we have only one mic. That's all good. Everything broke.
Hi everyone. Are we ready to start? Woohoo! So first of all, so this is the first time we're doing that meetup, and so I would like to thank all of you for coming for this first Data Bytes meetup. So a little bit, no, wrong button. See, we're learning. First, a little bit about myself. So I'm the co-founder and I'm the CEO of Bytes. And for those who are not familiar with Bytes, we are a data movement open source platform, meaning that we help companies access data sets across as many systems as you can think of. So if you have data behind an API, behind a database, behind a spreadsheet, behind a file, we give you access to that data so that you can move that data into a place where you will be able to extract value out of it. And of course, analytics is a big one. AI is another one. So that's really what we're focused on. And we open source, and we started the project, I would say, end of 2020. And today we have about 150,000 deployment of Bytes. Oops, wrong direction. So before we go and talk during that panel, I wanted to just give you a quick overview of what we're looking to achieve with Data Bytes. So the first thing is creating a meetup that is centered around data and AI. Like AI, LLM, Gen AI is nothing without data, and data is useless if it's not used by something else. So how can we have a meetup that joins the two of them? In terms of the audience, well, we welcome everyone, but the topics are going to be very engineering driven, whether you're a data engineer, AI engineer, or software engineer. And we're going to do that on a monthly basis. I think we already have two that are planned out for three. Okay, perfect. Three that are planned out for the next 3 months. So stay tuned. We're going to communicate around that. And what we want to do is basically a mix of either having a panel like we have today, or have people just go and talk about what prototypes they've been building, doing demos, same thing on product side, and also about like talking about news and different trends in the data and the AI industry. Now, why did we do Data Bytes? I mean, there's a lot of meetups that exist today, but one of the things we wanted to do is to really have a place where our community can really meet in person. Like as I said, we have a lot of people that are using Bytes, for example, today, and San Francisco is also a big center for everything data and AI related, so we want to just get all this community to have a place where they can meet, learn, and grow with others, and really be, I think this morning someone was asking me, Michel, what would be a success for you with Data Bytes? And I said, well, if tomorrow you come back to the office, go in front of your computer and start playing with something that you've learned the day before during that meetup, well, that would be a big win for me, because it means that we're creating serendipity and we can have people to learn from each other. So that's really the idea here. It's the first time we're doing it, so please let us know if you have feedback. Also let us know if you want to present, or if you have friends who wants to present in front of that crowd. And yes, any feedback you have, you just let us know. And yeah, so today we have an amazing panel. We have Eric from LangChain, we have Bindi from Bytes, and we have Roy from Pinecone. So welcome, and yeah, happy to have a great conversation tonight. You want to go? And by the way, I'm sorry, I only have one mic. Everything broke before, so it's gonna get better for the second one. If you want to just give a quick intro.
Sure. First of all, thanks Michelle and the Bytes team for hosting this. Your office is beautiful. This is a great space. I'm Eric. I'm an engineer at LangChain along with Alex and Brace, who are out in the audience. And I do a lot of work on our integrations and partnerships.
Thank you, Michelle, for having me on the panel. I'm Bindi from Bytes, and I'm Eng lead for the AI and LLM team.
Again, thank you so much. This is a really beautiful space, and congrats on the new space. I'm Roy from Pinecone, together with Jocelyn, who's somewhere in the crowd, from the DevRel team at Pinecone.
All right, thank you. So we're going to start very easy. I have a cool question, which is, what are so far the most interesting and the most surprising application and techniques in the LLM space that you've seen lately?
Surprising techniques. I think one of the ones I'm most excited about is actually just having LLMs really do a lot of the work around developing with LLMs, whether that's prompt engineering or actually we have some projects related to code generation for actual apps using either LangGraph or LangChain itself to kind of deliver on people's use cases. And so I think that's the area that I'm most excited about, and some news coming out next week related to that.
For me, I have to say recently I came across this company that does personalized marketing videos. They're a YC company called Tavis. And what they ask you to do is actually upload one video targeting one customer, and they generate hundreds and thousands of videos targeting multiple customers. So what they basically do is replace the keywords in the videos. So say if I have a video where I say, hi Jennifer, use Airbyte Cloud, you can change it to saying, hello Bob, use Airbyte OSS. So this is something we've been doing with personalized emails for a long time, and it's really nice to see it being applied to videos, I think.
So for me, I think the thing that's most exciting, and I'm biased because I work for a vector database company, we care about embeddings. I'm really excited to see int8 and binary embeddings come out and kind of be a lot more prominent. That just means that people are going to be able to store a lot less information, basically compress it, but still not lose the coherence and basically their ability to retrieve accurate data. So that's a very exciting trend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I was at a meetup last week, and they were talking about all the different ways of compressing and embedding. It's pretty cool. And so since we're talking about productionizing and all of that, there is always this thing whenever you build your first app, which is it's a wow effect, it's amazing, and then you start. Actually, I was talking with Brian, with one of our engineer leader here, and was generating a documentation automatically for our connectors. And what was very funny is that it looks great, and then something breaks, change a little thing, something breaks elsewhere. So this is really what the problem that comes up when you go and try to go on production. What would be some advice or things that you would want people or tell people to think about whenever they are going for this prototype, to anticipate and to know what are going to be the pain that they will have going into production, and how do you go about fixing the low-hanging fruit there?
Yeah. Should we start with Roy this time?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. I think that the most important thing to be able to do is, similar to the way that kind of software engineering in general kind of relies on your ability to test your software and validate that it's working properly. The same applies to LLM-based or AI, just Gen AI applications as well. And I think that a good thing to do is to think about your evaluation criteria and methodology from the get-go, right? So there are a lot of tools that are coming out. To think of TrueEra and their TrueLens and Galileo, and there's many other tools that are basically meant for you to build your pipeline in such a way that you'll be able to understand whether or not the responses that you're getting back from your application are what you're expecting to see or not, and whether the changes that you're making to your pipeline are actually having a positive or an adverse effect. So I think that would be the most important thing to do, because what we're seeing, in a lot of companies that are actually in production is that they're basically guessing, right? They're hoping for the best, and then running into the worst, right? And you kind of want to preempt that as much as possible.
Yes, actually, I was going to say the same. Actually, the top for me would be when you're building an app, think about how you would evaluate it in production, right? And even thinking about what you need to evaluate it on, because there are just so many criteria. And one other, from personal experience is when you're building a prototype, your cost doesn't matter, right? But thinking about what would happen when you actually do it at scale, right? So say if you're processing a bunch of videos, it's really costly, you get your results, you're really happy. But what is actually going to happen when you move into production, and also the latency in that case?
Completely agree on the evaluation and things like that. I think a strategy that I've seen come up more recently, like within the last few weeks, that I'm really excited about, is actually trying to build systems that just get better from the feedback that they receive. So at LangChain, we also work on Langsmith, which is our kind of debugging and observability product. And we're really working on a ton of monitoring and evaluation features for that allow you to really reincorporate that feedback either as few-shot examples or different kinds of essentially data in order to iterate on your application, such that you can really kind of have your application iterate on itself. We're really running towards a vision of the world where software can kind of just improve itself from its usage, especially when people are giving concrete like thumbs up, thumbs down feedback or other ways.
Yeah, so really it's about how do you capture that feedback once in production, and always thinking of that as it's not something that you do after the fact, it's something you need to incorporate at the development phase.
100%.
Okay. So one thing, so Airbyte is an infrastructure company, meaning that we're pretty agnostic of use cases. I mean, it could be analytics, it could be like operational type of use case, or it can be about bringing data into a vector store. When I talk to other like CEOs and people that are building AI product, I realize that they have a very vertical way of thinking about product development, meaning that they go and they build almost the whole stack internally. And that makes sense when you're in a very fast-moving industry, very fast-moving, working with very fast-moving technology. But at some point, there will be some consolidation in terms of what you build internally and what you outsource. Like typically, like Pinecone is a piece of infrastructure that you don't need to verticalize and create internally. What do you see are potential new infrastructure products that are going to come up that will make the life easier for companies to develop new AI applications on top of?
Well, I have to say data movement. So Airbyte, we do data movement, but recently we've come across a lot of companies who are tackling AI use cases, and they want to use powered by Airbyte, right? Because they don't want to worry about data movement from point A to point B. So I feel like that is something that will become table stakes, and people would want to have that from the get-go. And another one that I have a personal experience on is managed RAG. Because it's not something everyone can build from scratch. So when they have managed RAG, they can focus on actually building the business logic.
Where do we go? Yeah, I think that like the theme that I think is repeating across like the Gen AI LLM space is that there's never one tool that you need and wham bam and you're done, right? It's always about orchestration and composition, right? And I think that in that space, LangChain is perhaps like the most well-known kind of framework that consolidates a lot of these tools together. But I think that there's still a long way to go in terms of your ability to take all of these smaller pieces that are sort of like the commodity of the ecosystem. So for example, like models are essentially the commodity, right? Like you're gonna change your models, and models are gonna improve over time, and your system is gonna have to evolve with them, right? And so I think that the set of tools that I would like to see most is the ones that kind of bring about like an easier kind of developer experience for developers who have to bring all of these different tools together. So I think Airbyte is a great example, right, of like sort of the top of the pipeline, right, like gathering all of your data sources and connecting them into your pipeline, right? But it also includes other things like, when we start thinking about agents and the tools that they're using, and monitoring and evaluation, all of these things sort of right now are sort of cobbled together, and there's not really a systematic way to do it just yet. So I'm really excited to see what the industry as a whole is going to come up with.
Yeah, and continuing on that, here's time for my biased answer. Also very excited about kind of orchestration. And I think there's a lot of infrastructure related to the different kinds of software that people aren't really thinking about right now. There's a kind of whole new ways of building software with LLMs where you can really trust software to run on its own and really push information to you over time. And I think there's some really interesting infrastructure related to memory, long-running agents, and kind of how you orchestrate a lot of those cycles that I'm really excited about.
Mm-hmm. Such a tease.
Yeah.
There's something coming.
Yeah. And you were talking about managed RAG. So you know, for some reason, I feel like the world is now going for more like longer context window. We got 1 million. Pretty sure that now people are racing to see who has the biggest number here. How does that affect how people think about the RAG architecture now that your context is practically, I won't say unlimited, but pretty big? How will that impact this type of architecture, and how can we take advantage of that?
Yeah, great question. And very related to one of my coworkers loves doing talks about is RAG dead as a result of long context windows. I think, yeah, I share Lance's take where I think retrieval is still a really important part of these systems. I don't think we're going to want to paste all 2 billion tokens of Wikipedia into an LLM anytime soon, where you're really going to want to, if anything, it's going to be about what you don't select rather than what you do select, because with really long context windows, it's very tempting to just throw everything you want into there, which sets yourself up for things like context poisoning, and you can end up with responses to users that are quite unrelated to what you asked for, just because you put in too many documents that were about, I don't know, pizza toppings or something like that. So I think retrieval will still be super relevant, and yeah, very bullish on data.
So I think it's great to have a long context window, and you guys probably know more about this. But I feel RAG will be more valuable when you're actually loading data from multiple sources, right? Data that changes over time, right? Maybe data where you have to think about source-based permissions, right? So you cannot really just put everything in the context, in those cases. And if you think about multimodal, video, audio, text, I feel like RAG can definitely handle that better. And just one thing I would like to say is we like to talk a lot about whether RAG is dead because of the long context, but we should also think about what the long context window actually enables us to do. So for example, with Gemini Pro, you can actually send an hour-long video and do some sort of manipulation on it. So that was actually not possible before. So I would definitely encourage people to think more about the different modalities as well.
I think that our part of RAG, right, is kind of obvious. It's doing a lot of work, right? There's a lot of reasoning that goes into what is being retrieved and how it's being retrieved, like was already said. But some of like the magic happens in the actual content that lies inside of those external systems, those additional systems, and it's just a matter of understanding like how much of the reasoning lives within the LLM and how much of the reasoning happens outside of the LLM. And to me, it's more about how do we combine and sort of balance, right, between these responsibilities, right? Like what do we trust the LLM to do effectively, and what we don't trust the LLM to do effectively, and then we need to rely on other systems to do.
Yeah, that's a good one. Going back to talking with Brian yesterday, he was having this issue where not properly formatted JSON was coming out of the LLM. Said, yeah, you can solve it with the LLM, or you can just put a good old Python script on top of it. And that's actually a little bit related to how we talked about RAG and putting like lots of content and handling security. You can obviously not put all the data because you have data that can be private, that you can have like some security requirements or permissioning thing. we've seen a lot of, and I was talking with an engineer from NVIDIA where they had put out this amazing internal application that they had built, and they had to put it out because it was giving access to too much data to people that were not supposed to look at it. And I think it's going to be a common problem in a lot of companies that are trying to roll out their own application, which is, well, now you have to be even more careful about the security and the privacy of your data. If you had any advice on how to approach it, like from first principle, like how to think about the privacy and the security of your data as you're building these apps, what should people start thinking about right now instead of when the application is out? Like, any advice there?
Yeah, great question. And something that we work on a lot at LangChain. I think it's actually not that different of a problem as kind of the old world security problem, because these language models, sure, you can use them as reasoning models to power kind of what you do next or what query you execute against your SQL instance, but you should still protect your SQL instance, right? You probably don't want to give like write access to your production database to an intern, let alone a language model that a user can interact with directly. And so I think there's still a huge place in the world for access control lists and kind of all the boring stuff that needs to go into some of those systems, if not actually more important, because now you're actually taking out some sort of human element that has slightly more common sense and not just specific instructions to validate whether you should be giving access to something or not.
So I feel that this is something, like you said, Michelle, I feel like people need to think about security when they're starting out with their idea, right? Talk to your customers. Are they big companies, small companies? What do they care about? So a lot of them maybe want on-prem solution, right? Some of them don't want their data to leave their cloud boundaries, right? And maybe say if you're using OpenAI, you want the possibility of hosting in Azure, right? Or if you're using Gemini, you want the possibility to host in Google Cloud. So thinking about those actually from the get-go, I think is super valuable. And like Eric said, a lot of the basic, wisdom is don't, store PII or encrypt your PII. Make sure you're not using your customers' data for training, and things like that.
Yeah, I just mostly would echo what Eric and Bindi said. I think that, maybe on the retrieval side, we can talk a little bit more. I think that again, like you're going to have to use like your normal RBAC or ABAC or REBAC kind of patterns, right? Where the pattern is kind of known, right? You have, for example, if you're using a vector database or really any other database, right? You have some relationship or some correlation between a set of resources and an identity or a set of identities or groups, etc. And then you're doing your query as you would, and then you do some sort of filtering at the end to get like the subset that you actually have access to. And that's another reason, by the way, for why RAG isn't going away anytime soon, because again, that's not a capability you can just bake into an LLM.
Yeah. That's a good point. I would say maybe the only thing then also to think about is probably around like UX, because the way most of these new applications are coming is it feels like they have all of the data, and there might be places where you should disclose that there is data that is not available to you, so that you understand that what you're looking at is not the complete information. I think that's always something to think about as you're building is how do you show that, because on a big piece of text you won't know that some context was not made available to you. Okay, let me see. How much more time do we have? I did not check the time.
7:11 right now.
Okay. What is a recent project that you worked on that you're super excited about? Something that you're doing personally?
Be patient.
So actually, is it okay if I talk about work stuff?
Yeah.
Recently we launched Bytes. Some of you might have heard of it. It's basically we packaged all of Bytes connectors in a Python library, so you can kind of use it from a notebook. It's like super simple. So this is the first time we're using, we launched a product like Byte, where folks actually have to understand how to use a connector. So we actually, and we have 250 plus sources that you can use with Byte. So we wanted to actually write documentation illustrating how you use each and every source, because some of them, like Google Drive, can get very complicated. And that was not feasible, so we're actually using LLM to do that. So what we do is we go through every connector and kind of read the spec for that connector and generate a usage per connector. And we do spot checks to make sure things are going well, but generally the result is pretty promising, and we're super excited about that. And this is something I think we're doing in the company as well in general, is how can we use LLM to improve our documentation and make things more, human readable and easy to understand.
The project that is exciting me is also kind of work related, but it relates to the last question that you asked about. And it's actually setting up a basic kind of flow for authorization for RAG applications. I find it fascinating. Like there's a lot of ways to kind of tackle that problem, but using other SaaS products that actually deal with authorization and not building the whole thing myself is actually quite. It makes it all a lot easier, because authorization is quite a challenge to do at scale. Yeah, that's my thing.
When I'm not an AI nerd, I'm a systems nerd. And so one of the things I'm most excited about that I've been working on is some work kind of in how you actually host a lot of these applications and run them in kind of ways that were optimal for pre-AI software as well. And I think some of the, I think over the last year, we've been able to get by with a lot of kind of hackier software where you're just spinning up a fast API instance or that kind of thing, which works really well when you're in kind of the prototype phase. But we're getting to the point where a lot of use cases are really ready to kind of go to production and really need the scale of some of those larger hosting providers or different kinds of like content delivery systems. And so, yeah, some of the work I've been doing recently has been related to kind of running a lot of these like LangServe instances at the edge and things like that, which has been a lot of fun and kind of scratched that itch of the system side.
Is that an idea for what kind of infrastructure needs to be built for hosting these applications?
For sure, yeah.
If anyone is looking for ideas. Cool. So I have some extra questions. There is just one. It's one that I always ask whenever I'm talking to like customers or community members. This magic one question, which is, if there is one thing that you would want to change about AI application development, like your crazy dream, what would it be? And I'm looking for ideas as well.
Yeah. I don't have an idea.
On the spot. I don't think I saw that question. But if there's one thing I'd like to change, the non-deterministic kind of nature of LLMs makes it so that it's really hard to kind of rely on them, very blindly. The alternative to them not being deterministic is being able to run them many, 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 many times, so that you can see like what is like the distribution of an answer, right? And the thing that prevents you from doing that is that they're very, very, very slow, right? Mm-hmm. And so the thing that I would want more than anything is for all of an LLM to be as performant as GPT-4 and as fast as Grok, and to cost a lot less than both. I think if you get that sort of, and ideally, right, like when we get to the point where you can run these things locally, mm-hmm. And develop with them, I think that the advancement in the field is going to be a lot really accelerated, and I see like a lot of customers and people in general just not having a lot of faith in LLMs because they mess up a lot, and Pinecone kind of like wants to change that, and even with Pinecone, even with vector databases, there's limits to what you can do. So we have to sort of come up with techniques that overcome these challenges, because like the indeterminate nature of LLMs isn't going away, right? Like it's going to always be there to some extent.
Yeah.
That was going to be my answer, but I'll say something else. I think kind of along similar lines, I feel like I used DALL-E multiple times, and I wish it could build up on the previous image, right? And I want it to be more realistic, right? I mean, I don't need such futuristic images, because usually I'm looking for a creative, for a campaign that I want to run, right? And I want to kind of improve it progressively and see how it grows. And right now, I think that is really lacking. It's these models are really good at generating photorealistic images, beautiful human beings, but yeah, when it comes to doing practical stuff at work, I feel like they really lack.
For me, it's probably more related to user interfaces. I find that I actually interact with these LLM-powered systems very differently depending if I'm in a chat window, it's doing some sort of autocomplete on some sort of text box I'm in, or I'm talking to it. And I think one thing in my development process, I'm always just prototyping with chat interfaces, because my coworker Jacob made a really nice chat playground in LangServe last week that is my daily driver for using that. But I still use like the ChatGPT app because it has kind of audio in, audio out. And so if I'm like out on a walk and just like want to catch up on the news or something like that, I'll still use the app for that. And I think there's a lot of space for kind of modular interfaces in order to interact with these systems.
Mm. Yeah, that remember I was talking with AJ, who's one of our engineers at Bytes. You know AJ. Yeah. And you know AJ also as well. Yeah. And he was telling me that he was playing Pokemon with one of his kids, and he had ChatGPT listening and spitting out stuff next to him, and his kid was just asking a question about, hey, what is the weakness of that particular Pokemon? What should I use? And ChatGPT was just finding stuff and spitting it out, so never had to switch context from Google, going on Google, searching for something. It was just his son was, or his daughter, I forgot, was just asking ChatGPT and was getting live answers. So amazing use case for like this in and outs. Cool. I mean, that's pretty much what I have for today. I would like to. I hope you all got something out of that conversation, and yeah, thank you all for coming. We have plenty of food. I hope you all have a good time talking to each other, and yeah, thank you all three for coming. Of course, we have questions. Thank you. See, first time. Any questions?
I can say it loud.
Okay, let's do it.
Excuse my accent. I think, Eric, you brought it up. It's a question just generally. Memory is becoming more and more prevalent. It's like a broad term. But I'd be curious, is like what's top of mind when you talk about memory? Like, does it mean retrieval? Does it mean storage? Like, how are you guys thinking about memory more broadly?
Great question. And for people on YouTube, the question was about what kind of defines memory, how do we think about retrieval, and some of the other aspects of it. And I would say it's very much an open question. I think there's a lot of different ways to structure memories. There's ranges from kind of message histories, are the kind of simplest example of this, all the way to trying to synthesize memories. For anyone who read like the agent simulacra paper last year, I think that was kind of one of the first instances where I got really excited about kind of different ways of structuring memory and memory hierarchies. So long story short, not really a defined answer, and I am really excited to see how people use different forms of memory. And we offer a few of them through LangChain for anyone wanting to try them out. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's in all of our decks, so I have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we see kind of like Eric said. I mean, there's not one thing that you say, oh, that's memory, right? But to me, like vectors and are a good, or essentially embeddings, right? Are a good way to think about simulacrum of a memory, right? because there's something about the fuzziness, right, of the embedding, right, like the fact that it contains the context that exists around any kind of piece of content, whether it's an image or text or what have you, audio, right, that allows you to then retrieve it, right, even if you don't have an exact match, right, but rather a contextual or semantic match, right, and that, you know, kind of serves within like AI systems, right, as some form of memory, right?
Actually, one more. And going back to the long context LLMs question, I think one thing that's really exciting about long context LLMs is the fact that you can plumb more memories into them. Like when the simulacra paper came out, the maximum context window you could really get was 4,000 tokens, and so you really needed to synthesize memories into kind of cohesive little things like John likes to celebrate birthdays with cake and things like that. Whereas now you can really plumb through just entire conversation histories or kind of agent, action, and result pairs, which is very exciting. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on memory.
Any other?
I got super fascinated on the idea of like making LLMs more deterministic, or the responses by using them in parallel and taking an average. We used to do that as a quant, like trying to forecast stock prices, and then we'll do a Monte Carlo simulation. Will this be like a similar process on the LLM response size? And like, I guess like what makes you think that this could be like a normal distribution, or how?
This is fully a gut instinct kind of thing, right? Like I've not written a paper or really researched it in depth, right? But like my instinct tells me that it's not like that you're going to take, you know, just the same query and run it, you know, 1,000 times, get a distribution, and get back a result, right? What I do see happening already is that you'd be able to run the LLM and sort of point it in different directions to get, you know, sort of either an affirmation or sort of a counter argument to something that you've produced, right? So I've seen this happen, you know, with RAG applications where you can, you know, produce a set of documents, right, that pertain to answer to some question, and then you ask the LLM in all sorts of ways to produce critiques, right, of the content that you created, right? And then it will tell you, hey, I think it's good, I think it's bad, right? Now, doing that process is super expensive, right? Like, because you're now calling the LLM several times, right, to get more and more, like a more and more refined question, answer, right? And what I think is going to happen, right, is not necessarily, again, that you're going to get a distribution of answers, but you're going to have multiple processes, right, whether it's agents or something else, right, that are sort of trying to attack a problem from all sorts of different angles, until you can get to like some result that you get consensus on, at least from sort of a community or a society of smaller LLMs. If that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, and also bouncing off of that, there's like a lot of different layers that you can kind of follow those approaches where you're either averaging out models or using different model calls in order to kind of find the best answer, a quote from some sort of society of answers. All the way down to like the actual model layer, where there's actually a lot of open source models that are just like two other LLMs smushed together, where they're just like averaging some layer towards the end of them. So I think that's an area that's very cool. Yeah, more to kind of, I don't think any of us do model development, but so the higher level answers are probably more exciting to us. But we have a lot of examples implementing papers like Storm, which was published, I think, in about a month ago, where you actually create these kind of multi-agent groups where you create actual like personalities. So Storm was very focused on writing Wikipedia articles from other Wikipedia articles. So essentially like using a lot of other articles as styles. So then you send those to, I think it was editors. Then you had some researchers that had like a web search tool. So you could ask the researcher, or the agent could like ask the researcher to go and like validate something by doing a Google search or something like that, and then say like, no, like you're lying in your Wikipedia article. And then it like goes and modifies based on that. So there's lots of cool approaches. To Roy's point, it's also very expensive when you use a more expensive LLM, but I think it shows a vision of the future when both token costs go down as well as you can get better results from some of these more like loopy systems.
I have one from YouTube.
Yeah.
So from Ray, he asks, how can we be sure of the training retentions of personal identifiable information in LLMs, and how do you treat sensitive informations?
Retention of personally identifiable information and how do you treat sensitive information. I think kind of to my previous answer, I think a lot of these new LLM-powered apps actually have the same problems that we've always had. And so you just, I think it really boils down to you need to be careful about where you're storing your logs. You need to be careful about, I think there's a lot of great regexes out there that like search your logs for credit card numbers and social security numbers and all the things that are going to get you in trouble. And I think all of those are still going to be super relevant. If anything, I think there's going to be a lot of kind of log sanitization agents as well, where it's like, hey, what kind of stuff am I not capturing, or what parts of my apps are, which parts of my app are logging information that should not be used. And then another angle on it is just telling your users like, hey, do not tell me your social security number in chat, even though I like feel more like an agent that you're talking to on the phone rather than like some random Google form. So yeah, old world problems.
Actually, like coming from the data ingestion side, there is already a lot of techniques that allow you to tokenize this kind of data, that allows you to anonymize every piece of data, and that will become something, for example, you need to do before you push data into a vector database. Like make sure you don't feed in your PII as part of it.
Yeah, no, I have nothing
Okay.
more to that.
I just wanted to add that sometimes if you use some tools like say Segment, and you're getting your requests from your customers through them, they actually can detect a lot of the PII and alert you on those as well.
One other approach that I've seen recently that's kind of fun is you use kind of a smaller local open source LLM that you're just running on your own hardware to actually just ask like, hey, replace all instances of names with person 1 and person 2. So you can actually still identify them uniquely throughout your application, and then you send it to OpenAI or whichever model you're using, which you might not want to send PII to, and then you like detokenize it on the way out. So kind of fun approaches.
Brilliant. I love it.
I have another one, directly towards Roy. You talked about context engines. Can you comment on the disparate dimensionality of vectors and needed different models and how you handle that?
Wow, I didn't get that at all. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, you've talked about context engines. Can you comment on the disparate dimensionality of vectors needed for different models and how you handle that?
Right. So if I can understand correctly, if I can maybe echo the question, I hope to do it justice. You could use models with different dimensions for different tasks and accomplish, get different results essentially. From what we've seen, and this goes back to what I talked about before about the compression, right? I think that like at the end of the day, you care about some core metrics, right? Your ability to recall data accurately, right? Your the storage that you're going to require, right? And the performance of the query overall. And so it's always going to be a trade-off, right? You're never going to get all of these things maxed out. And so, the smaller you're embedding, usually your accuracy goes down. The secret here is that the difference between a 768 dimension embedding and a 1536 dimension embedding turns out to be not that significant, right? And it takes half the space in your vector database, right? So you're basically paying for half the cost. And so, there's gonna have to be like a really good, justification for choosing to go with like a really big model, a model that produces like a lot of dimensions, especially when you can see that smaller dimensions still work fine. And as we move towards more compressed embeddings, that's going to even improve more. But again, like the bottom line is going to be, you're going to need those evaluation capabilities to understand what's the impact of your choice to your end product, right? Because I can tell you, hey, it's sort of kind of the same, right? But that's kind of like off the hip kind of answer, right? At the end of the day, when you productionize, right, you're gonna want to be able to measure the impact of your choices.
Oh yeah. On the subject of evaluations, what are some techniques you found effective for multimodal or evaluation of multimodal applications?
I don't know if I've evaluated any multimodal applications at scale. Generic answer, but human feedback is great evaluation for a lot of systems. And so getting just that thumbs up, thumbs down feedback if something made sense has been quite good.
I wonder if we're talking about video or audio, we can do transcription and kind of apply the similar techniques that you would do to text.
Oh, no, I don't really have. So can you talk more about the use case that you're looking at? Like
essentially, we're image parsing. So it's image plus prompt, and we have some level of human feedback now, but very curious if there's any automated techniques that are effective, similar to like TrueLens.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen anything for images, to be honest. And again, it depends on the actual task that you're trying to accomplish with the model. But yeah, like I haven't seen anything particular for images. One thing that comes to mind is again like that ability to use the description of the image as your guiding kind of indicator, as opposed to the actual vectors that represent the image itself. But yeah, that's kind of like neither here nor there. So, sorry.
Best answer I've got.
Time for one more.
Time for one more question. Anyone?
LLM for recommendation engines? Yeah, great question. I think, I don't know if I've worked on any recommendation engines recently, but yeah, right, obviously.
I just wrote not just, but I wrote one of our examples that does that. Basically, what you do is you produce a set of vectors that represent the choices that, say, user X makes, right? So like what posts they're reading or something of that sort, let's say. And the actual, the recommendation is very simple. It's actually a mean or an average sort of all of the vectors that represent, all of the user's choices, right? So you essentially get back one vector that is the recommendation vector, and then you can use that as your query to get back more pieces of information, right, based on that post, but based on that vector, right? Does that make sense? So we got our, let's say, 10 vectors that the user consumed, posts, for example, and then we have this one vector that represents the mean, and then we use that vector as the query vector, and then we get back results that are going to be similar to the average of all of those posts that the user interacted with.
Only thing to add is on just kind of general optimizing some of these LLM systems. I think getting recommendation output from a tool calling model is actually relatively similar to getting kind of classification output and things like that. Just by nature of it's more different prompts, and you just are asking for different kinds of output. And so I think some of the few shot example systems that I referenced a little bit earlier, where you're retrieving kind of similar examples that were rated well in the past in order to essentially get the model to perform in a similar fashion, have been very beneficial in classification systems, but not specific to recommendation.
Cool. Anything else?
Good on Brian.
Great. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming. And yeah, just enjoy the rest of the evening. I'm sure we have a ton of food left. So enjoy, feed yourself.